My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
All right, party people, welcome back to Zero Dark Nerdy, the galaxy's favorite pop culture podcast, brought to you by the Believe Podcast Network, betonline.ag for all your sports betting needs, and our good friends over at Sailfish Comics. 3 incredible locations for you here in North Carolina. One right here in Greensboro across from Best Buy, one in Winston-Salem, and one in Concord right outside of Charlotte. Be sure to check them out for all your comic book, graphic novel, action figures, Funkos, the whole 9 yards. If you're into nerdy, geeky stuff, I guarantee you they have it. Again, that is Sailfish Comics with 2 S's. Be sure to check out all 3 of their locations as well as their website. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very, very special treat for you today. If you are watching HBO Max right now, the one thing you need to be watching is the Golden Boy 2-part documentary. Saba and I just checked it out a couple weeks ago, and we have the production company as well as the director of the film, Fernando Villena, a.k.a. the V-Man, according to Archie, and our good friend Archie Gips, back with us here on Zero Dark Nerdy Podcast. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Always.
Of course.
I just want to say, let me say one thing before we start asking questions.
Right ahead.
I am I'm a huge boxing fan.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, my brother-in-law, I used to go over to my sister's house and we would watch boxing coming up. So I've been following Oscar De La Hoya not necessarily since Barcelona 92, but definitely shortly thereafter. I would say roughly 95, 96. And then obviously throughout the remainder of his career up through the Pacquiao fight. So, this definitely came as we had all seen a lot of the stuff that had come out through the media or whatever, but getting a glimpse into the Golden Boy persona and hearing it in Oscar's own words. I mean, just the idea behind this thing and everything that you guys did, the way that you shot it, where Oscar was always in black and white, and just everything about it was amazing. And I just want to say that before we start asking questions, how I'm a huge fan of unrealistic ideas. And Archie, I give you a lot of shit, man, but I'm telling you, it's getting to the point now where it's like when you see unrealistic ideas production, that it's going to be a banger. And I just want to tell you that we're huge fans of you guys. Fernando, huge fan of your project. And I just wanted to say that before we get started, how amazing I thought it was. And just thank you guys for being on the show today.
No, it's super kind of you. I think Fern, you might be muted. This is when you run a production company and you have to oversee a lot of projects, you always have the highest expectation for your projects, but they're only as good as the people that are running it or directing it. And the potential for this documentary, we always thought it was really high. And Fernando took it to a level that blew my expectations away. I mean, so far past, I always thought it'd be a great doc, but to the level and the expertise and the craftsmanship that he put into this, obviously we're helping, and David Wendell, who is our head of docs, every second of the way was working with Fernando. But it was really, a testament to Fernando, his vision, his passion for the project that just turned it into a great project, into a phenomenal project.
Yeah. Before I started doing a lot of research, and I was like, all right, what projects has Unrealistic done? So I was like, oh, well, I'll start with McMillions, right? Then I saw it and I was like, oh man. Well, first of all, I have to aim higher than that, right? Because I'm always trying to aim high. I was like, that's really good filmmaking right there. I was like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna do this, right? But I wanted to keep the to keep the bar of unrealistic work. You know, I wanted to meet that bar and hopefully, you know, maybe even help elevate it, you know, because, you know, from the very beginning, I knew what serious filmmakers they were.
Fern, did you know Oscar prior to the start of production on this?
Like personally, or
yeah.
No, not at all. I'm not a real boxing fan either. You know, I grew up watching boxing, but like essentially since Oscar became Oscar in '92, I haven't really followed it because that's kind of when I went away to college.
Yeah, sure.
And couldn't afford cable TV anymore. So
or pay-per-view.
So yeah, so I stopped watching fights. But no, I wasn't. I didn't know him personally. Didn't know much about his career. Fun fact: I didn't even know about the photographs.
Okay.
The fishnet photographs.
Yeah,
I was like, guys, have you heard about this?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we know all about it.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like a big discovery, the whole project about him and his life and everything.
I mean, we didn't know. I knew about him, of course, as like a celebrity. I'm not a big boxing fan either. Mm-hmm. Really, the person on our team that was the knowledgeable one when it came to boxing was Mario Lopez.
Yeah.
Right. Who was a great, you know, he was our partner on this, his VMR, his company with Jeff Stearns. He knew every single fight, every Oscar, and he's obviously great friends with Oscar, but he would be, oh yeah, that fight and this round and that. And so he was our resident expert if we ever needed, you know, one, as far as looking at it from that perspective of like, is this going to entertain the boxing fan? Because we knew it would entertain the non-boxing fan based on Fernando and I not really being, you know, huge boxing fans.
I mean, I've watched the majority of those fights. The Tito Trinidad fight, through 7 rounds, he was up big. He basically skated his way back the last 5 rounds of the fight, and that was really the beginning of sort of his descent. Then obviously Mosley beat him. All that. I mean, guys, I watched every single one of those fights live in real time. So watching this like took me back on a journey through my you know, formative years and in my 20s. So it was amazing. Let me add, Brian, I know you want to jump in here, but I got to ask this question. Look, you Fernando, you filmed it in such a way that you allow the audience, the viewer, to make a decision about how they feel about Oscar De La Hoya in the end, right? Like, I think all good filmmakers, especially when you're a documentary filmmaker, you don't want to slant it and sort of nudge the audience in the right way. Was it your intention to have people walking away asking themselves, wow, is Oscar De La Hoya a scumbag? Is he a tortured soul? Is he misunderstood? Like, there's all these questions that I had. Obviously, I'm going to save my opinion of how I feel about him because, you know, I'm not the best because I hold De La Hoya in such reverence because I watched him for so many years, right? But I mean, was that your intention to sort of let the audience make their decision and to film it in a way where they could almost go any direction?
That's a banger question. That's like the question at the heart of this whole matter, right? It's like, how do you present Oscar to the world, right? In this documentary. And you know, there's one thing you said that I don't necessarily agree with. I think a lot of documentaries, right, today do want you to feel one way or another.
Right.
Right. They do have an agenda, whether it's, you know, a topical documentary about, you know, a Me Too movement or something like that, or
Sure.
you know. So I do think a lot of movies about celebrities do treat their celebrities, you know, differently, right? They don't
Sure.
put them under that harsh of a microscope, right? And I say we because this was a group effort, right? We had a lot of discussions about everything to do with the creative process and everything, with me and Archie and David Wendell and the rest of the creative crew. So it was always a group effort, right? How do we get to the heart of this? But yeah, I mean, I don't want to skew anybody's opinion. I wanted everybody to be able to speak their mind, right? And some people have commented that, you know, there's this project humanizes Oscar to a certain extent. I find that to be a really curious statement because if you told me right now to humanize somebody, I wouldn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Like how do you humanize a human, right? So I think what they're responding to is the fact that we're not judging Oscar necessarily. We're letting him speak. We're letting him kind of tell his story, but we're also letting his kids tell their stories, and we're letting his father and his ex-partners and people, that have a more complicated version of who Oscar is, right? To tell, and I think what it is you paint a fuller portrait of the person, and when you paint a more detailed, fuller portrait of somebody, I guess people take that as humanizing, right?
Right.
Because I think what the net effect of that is that you see somebody from different sides, and you're going to be able to connect and empathize with somebody, maybe somebody who you don't necessarily agree with the things that they've done in unexpected ways, because you might have been in that situation.
Sure.
And maybe you don't want to tell anybody, but maybe you behave similarly, right? Or whatever. But I do think that we never wanted to judge Oscar, because that would have been, easy to do, right? He wasn't around to raise his kids and all that, but he had a very complicated, difficult, traumatic upbringing.
Yes.
And I mean, you saw him in the ring, you saw those fights. He was a tremendous fighter, but he also provided generational wealth for his family. And, he's been retired for, 15 years now or so. Yeah. And he's probably doing better now financially than he did then. Like, how many boxers can say that, right?
Not many.
But this is a kid who didn't even know at 18 years old, how to save money.
Right.
So while he was in the ring, all that time, he was learning about life. He was learning about how to become a businessman and taking his lumps. And it's a big story. And we wanted to be very specific about how to tell it.
Yeah. To speak to what Fernando is saying, though, I mean, the humanizing of it, it's really, Fernando asked fantastic questions that Oscar gave honest answers to. But the really brave thing on Oscar's part was allowing Fernando to interview the other people in his life and get the not most flattering, statements out of them. Sure. And that's really the humanizing, is Oscar trusting us enough. And really that was Mark Wahlberg, my partner, basically was like, hey, tell the truth, man, let the truth come out and it's going to all be good. And it has been, because people are willing to forgive, if you're out there and you're honest about your real self. And so I think that that's what speaks to a lot of why people think this is a really special documentary, because it isn't a puff piece. It's not, like Fernando said, like a celebrity or a sports doc where you're getting bits and pieces, but you're not feeling a specific, you're not torn. Like, wow, I don't know how to feel about this person. Usually like, wow, this is the greatest person ever. And
right.
I think that, Fernando and the whole team obviously did a great job in just putting all the truth out there and letting the audience make their decision.
Grab your seat. All that's left is choosing butter or no butter, as if that's a tough decision. Every movie, every feeling, every time. That's Fandango. Your one stop before showtime. Buy your movie ticket now on the Fandango app or on fandango.com. Yeah, that was one of the first things I noticed when I texted Saba. I said, have you seen this yet? And he was like, no, not yet. He was on vacation, getting ready to come back. He was like, I'm going to check it out as soon as I get back. And I told him, I was like, this is probably one of the most honest, straightforward documentaries I've seen in a very long time. And not just from the person that it's about, but just like you said, the interviews, you could tell like there was no holds barred. It was like, hey, give us your take. We want to see every side of the story. There wasn't anything partial to it, which to me made it more special because, like Saba and I, we talk about this all the time on a lot of our episodes. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, right? And I mean, some that we can live with, some that we regret. And I mean, you could tell he has obviously a lot of regrets, especially when it comes to some of his kids and things like that. But seeing that honesty and that openness not just come from him, but from the others around him as well was very special in that. And I got to say, I try to keep an eye on just the little things. And I have to say, Fernando, when you were when you're watching the documentary and when you're introducing people and they look like fight match cards, I thought that was just like a very super nice touch on there. So, I just got to applaud you on that. It's just, and to me, I'm all about the little things and little things like that, especially growing up, like Saba did it. Boxing was predominant in our household as much as we could afford it, or at least, steal somebody else's pay-per-view password or whatever it was, we would do. So, with that being said, was this originally
statute of limitations has passed?
Right. And this was also the 80s too. So those times have been long gone. With that being said, when you were editing this and everything else, was there a part that you just said, hey, this is going to be part 1 or part 2? Was there originally a plan to maybe do a 4-part, 30 minutes long? What was that process like when it came to, okay, is this going to be a 2-part, hour and a half, or can we make this a 4-part, half-hour documentary?
Well, I think originally, I wasn't part of the development, and Archie can speak to this. Obviously, there were more episodes in the original kind of conceptualization of the project, and then when I started, it was, for whatever reason, it had been brought down to like a 190-minute film, right? Mm-hmm. And then we spent some time writing out the essentially a story map treatment for both episodes that showed the arc of the story and the characters and to a certain extent, like what a cliffhanger is going to be at the end of the first episode, but also it helped organize our ideas, where we realized that the first episode was more about the trauma that Oscar endured, right, when he was young. And the second episode was more about the pain that he inflicts on his loved ones and the people in his life, right? And it's not just that, but that was kind of like the organizing principle of it all, right? And then that made sense to us. And then, from it was really useful to go through that exercise to then understand that we had 2 parts. And this was essentially a 2-part. If we were going to go like 90 minutes, it was going to be 2 parts, or we could split it up in 3. But this was kind of like the amount of story that we wanted to investigate, right? So, it takes a little bit of a prep to get there.
Sorry, Fernando. I was going to say a lot of it also is the way HBO, they had tremendous success with the Tiger doc, which was a 2-parter.
Sure.
So they really encouraged us to go with that 2-parter as well, similar to that.
Okay. Now, in terms of your connection, how did it all come about? Because Fernando, I know you got 28 editing credits to your name. You've done a couple documentaries yourself. Did you already have, as far as you two, Archie and Fernando, a relationship beforehand where you were just like, hey, maybe we should give this guy the reins on this role? I'd love to hear how this all came about, because as I mentioned during the pre-show, we saw the beginnings of it in season 1 of Wall Street, where it was Mario Lopez and Oscar coming over, pitching to you and Mark about the idea of the documentary. And then seeing it coming to fruition, especially after this is when we first met, Archie, for those of you maybe just tuning in, that was our first episode we did, was talking about season 1 of Wall Street. So I'd love to hear about your backstory and how you guys got connected and all this.
Yeah, we started to like exactly like you said, we started developing this. I guess it must have been 2020, right? Because it was during the beginning of the pandemic. I met Oscar over a Zoom with Mark and Mario, and that's documented on the first season of Wall Street. And so we started, obviously legal things and getting into putting the deal together. And then David Wendell, again, you'll hear that name a lot. He put together a deck, which basically was pitching what we thought, what our vision was for the documentary. Without what we normally do at our company is David and I talk through the story, and we put together a deck that we use to attract either buyers or directors if we feel we need to attach a director in advance. With this, we felt that Oscar's story was so strong that we could probably sell it directly to a buyer without having a director attached, and then have the buyer say, oh, here's some directors we'd love to work with. And that's sort of what happened. We had a couple of names that we wanted, but Bentley over at HBO, she was working with Fernando and is like, hey, we're working with this guy on Dear Rider, which was a documentary about Burton. the snowboard. Why am I spacing on his first name? Jake Burton.
Jake Burton.
Yeah, sorry about that. Which is a phenomenal doc. If you haven't seen it, check that out as well. And so we watched the doc, and we dug it, and we met Fernando, and we thought he was awesome. And we had Fernando meet Oscar, and they two hit it off. And that's kind of the way, from my point of view, how it went down. Maybe Fernando, there was a different, you saw it from a different perspective, but that was.
No, it's pretty much the same. The only thing I would add to it is that I actually texted Bentley after I saw the Tiger doc, and was just texting her about it, and I know people have issues with that doc, but I really love it. With the limitations that they had to work with, I thought it was fantastic. So I was just chatting to her about it, and that's when she brought up De La Hoya. The interesting thing about that is that I was living in East LA in 2020, right? Because my wife, she had a house there. So it's like blocks away from where Oscar was running around and his gym and everything. So it was really interesting in that sense, right? Because I was immersed in that culture. I was going to those restaurants. I was walking my dogs.
You're jogging the same path that Oscar jogged.
Yeah. Well, I was more in Boyle Heights, but it's East LA, but yeah, I met David, I met Archie, and then of course I went to meet Oscar, and that meeting with Oscar, it was it was interesting. We talked about if there was anything that was off limits, and he said there wasn't.
There wasn't.
That's awesome.
There was, yeah. And he kept his word. A lot of people say that, but then they'll be like, hey, I don't want to talk about that. But he talked about everything. It wasn't always comfortable, but yeah.
I mean, for him though, it was like he kind of talked about it, or somebody talked about it. It was almost like a cleansing for him to let the world know, in his own words, right? This whole Golden Boy thing, it's fucking bullshit, right? And the reality is, right, the relationship with his mother, very back and forth, right? I love her, but there was sort of, some challenges there when she would get upset with him. His father has his own challenges. There's a cultural challenge. Him and his brother had a weird relationship. Like, just the fact that, and then the kids at the end in the second episode, right, where, he sort of manifested the things that happened in his life, maybe was a result of how his relationship was early on with his kids. I mean, the fact that he was just open to talk about all that, the fact that you said it, Fern, that he was willing to let other people provide dialogue and narrative on the things that he did, ex-spouses, all that. I mean, look, it's as raw as it gets, but you got to give Oscar a lot of credit because he is a very charismatic individual. You know what I mean? Like, when he's on, there's nobody that's better, but he washed all that away and was just very sort of honest, open, and attentive to the camera. And it's one of a kind, man. You guys did a phenomenal job. There's nothing else I can say. If you watch the doc, obviously you see these incredible interview setups that Fernando and his DP set up. They're beautiful. The Bob Arum is they're awesome. They're incredible, like tableaus, and they're beautiful. And that was originally at the beginning, HBO wanted us to have those beautiful for Oscar too. And Fernando, again, to his credit, we saw he was starting doing some interviews with Oscar. We watched some of the dailies, and I turned to Dave, I'm like, holy shit, this is like a therapy session. This is incredible. Like, the way that Fernando shot this, it's so intimate and raw. And Fernando, of course, was like, this is what I want to use. And this is that way. It feels so much more intimate and personal with Fernando, where everything else is much bigger. All the other interview setups there's more distance, and it's beautiful in color. And so that blew me away when I saw that interview for the first time, because it stripped away a lot of the pretense. Because Oscar is a promoter, so he's got all that bluster and sort of machismo going on, and to strip that away in these interviews is absolutely the secret sauce, I think, to the project.
Yeah, and the process lasted over a year. There were like 30 interviews, 50 hours of combined footage, and as we learned new information from other people that were interviewed, then I'd go back, because all the interviews of one-on-one, it was just me and him. And I would ask him about new stuff that came up, and so it was always evolving, but I knew he was highly media trained. I mean, he's been in front of the camera since he was like 16, 17 years old.
Sure.
But what I didn't realize when I started was that he's used to opening up to the camera, right? More so than people close in like his close family and friends. That said, I don't think he ever went through this process. And I knew we couldn't have a bunch of lights and producers running around and people helping him and makeup and like that wouldn't have gotten anywhere. There was just too much story to cover, too much ground to cover. And I wanted to give him like space to, if he was in a bad mood that day, be in a bad mood that day. I don't care. Let's just roll, right? And see what happens. And sometimes that really worked, right? Like a lot of times there's a subtext of what he's saying to the things that he's talking about. It's also like, it's hard to get people like that off their talking points, like are used to talking about their life story, right? It's hard to get them off their talking points. And I think the best way to do that is just do it slowly and methodically, right? And but he was game. And I, however you feel about Oscar as a person, I hope people can appreciate the fact that he did what he did. Like, he went through this process and he did open up, and he did allow people to be totally candid about their relationship with him. And it takes a lot of courage.
Getting Bernard Hopkins was great too, by the way. I just want to say that. Love Bernard Hopkins, boy. And he'll tell you anything you want to hear. And that, I thought, even though he was only in a very short period, they talked about, and I don't want to give too much away because we want people to watch, but Oscar brought Bernard Hopkins into Golden Boy. Listen, that's not bullshit. The world looked at that as sort of such a smart move by Oscar. And that really changed a lot of people's opinions of him, because Bernard Hopkins, that body shot he dropped him with in the ring, I mean, that was the first time that people saw Oscar, he was banging, he was crying. I don't listen, Bernard Hopkins hit me with a body shot, I'd be worse. I wouldn't get out of bed for 3 weeks. But the point is, I loved that part because it was very real. And yeah, I mean, I agree with it 100%. Anyway, I don't want to give too much more away. Brian, you got anything else?
Just a question right here for Fernando. So this is your fourth film as a director. I believe your first one, just look back.
But yeah, my first directing project was Any One of Us, which is on HBO as well.
That's right. So yeah, so Any One of Us was done in 2019, and you do this one like soon after, and I know you have a couple in between. How do you feel you've grown as a director in this space? And is this a space you want to stay in?
Well, that's a great question. You guys have some really great questions here. I think tremendous. Like, I've grown from where, like, my first day shooting on Any One of Us, I was like, what do I do? I was like, I turned to the producer and I was like, am I supposed to say something now, or just let them kind of do their thing? And he's like, we'll talk later. Just let them do their thing, right? So yeah, I've come a long way. God, it's like the most important thing in life is confidence, You're
damn right.
But yeah, there is a little bit of faking it till you make it, right? That can get you so far. But I mean, confidence you only get by experience and by getting knocked down, getting punched in the face, right? And like, I can take it, and then you get back up and trying things. And I'm not afraid to try things. That's the one thing. I'm not afraid to try things. I'm not afraid to fall on my face. And because I do try and create an environment, a work environment that's open and people can just say their minds. And I love collaboration, as Archie knows. But I think confidence is key, and that comes with experience. But I did come in with a certain skill set, and that's editing. Right. I can get in the ring with anybody, I feel, as an editor. But where aspects that I had to learn, on the visual side, on the graphic side, on music side, because I've always had input, but it's never been my call, right? So now it's like, oh shoot, now this is my call. Like I have to be more thoughtful and specific about what I'm seeing in my head or what I'm not seeing in my head, right? And I think it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process. And Archie and I went to dinner with Bentley and David and Abtine a few months ago. And Archie did mention something, which I'm not going to say here, but he did mention something that I can improve on. And I was like, oh, and I did write it down. But because I want to get better. I want to get better, you know? And I love, and it sounds cheesy or whatever, but I love living in the moment, you know, and I love experiencing everything. And to me, direct editing is great. I love it, right? But directing is way more fun.
Archie's used
to there's more headaches, but it's way more fun.
Archie's used to getting feedback and constructive criticism from his business partners, so it's good to see that you're learning from that. Now you're passing that along, Archie.
Well, no, I was going to say that. I mean, look, I thrive off of constructive criticism, and Fernando, to his credit, is one of the few directors we've worked with that I think is at my level. Like I give notes, and it wouldn't be like, yeah, okay, whatever. Everything was thoughtful. It's like, okay, well, I hear you. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Like, it wasn't just like, I'm not doing these notes, or it wasn't like, I'm doing all these notes. It was like, let's discuss these things. Let's make this project better together. And that is not an easy thing for a director.
Right.
Trust me, I've directed projects myself. And a lot of times your ego gets in the way, a very specific vision that you have in your head for like 2 years. And someone else comes with an idea and you're like, shit, that is a really good idea, but I don't want to change my vision. And it's like, but Fernando is always like, found the right path, you know, and especially we had an incredible time making this film with him. And yes, to what you alluded to, we absolutely would love to work with him again. And we have plans on some projects in the future that we have earmarked for Fernando. So hopefully we could get those things across the finish line.
Well, that's a good segue. And I don't know how much you guys can talk about it, but you know, what is next for you guys, for both of you? I mean, are there things that are you know, in production or near the close of production that you can share with us, either of you?
And I mean, we know the strike's going on, so you may be limited to what you
exactly. So if you can't say anything, we understand.
Right, so we get it.
I'll tell you the first thing that Fernando and I have going on, which is a fantasy football league, which will be hotly. One of the reasons why Fernando and I get along so well is that, as you know, I'm a diehard Jets fan. Fernando, unfortunately, is a diehard Dolphins fan. So we go at it in a very playful way. We have a bet on the season, I believe, right? I think.
Yeah, our bet is that like whoever gets more MVP votes, Tua or who's your quarterback? Who's your quarterback again? I forget. Yeah. Whoever gets most. Yeah, whoever gets
the guy who
the least amount of MVP votes, they have to pay for dinner.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this is one lethal combination right here. So would love to see more UI Fernando collaborations definitely going on in the future. One question I'd love to ask, just because, you know, kids are going back to school here in about a week or so. We're going to have a podcast episode coming out soon on some favorite movies based on school, whether high school, well, primarily high school. And, you know, we can start with whoever wants to go first. Is there top 3 movies that you have just based on school in general?
Well, first of all, school started in LA yesterday.
Goodness. Yeah, not on the East Coast.
We're already back in the thick. My kid's going to kindergarten now. My daughter's in 2nd grade. So, Fern, I have about 50 of them.
top three schools about, I mean, movies about school?
Scripted, right?
Yeah, scripted. Yes,
scripted.
Yeah.
Okay. And school just has to be part of the story, or does
I mean the main part of it? Yeah, but yeah,
the main part of it. I mean, Breakfast Club probably be right up there.
All right. All right.
Taps.
Ooh,
I love Taps.
I never thought I'd hear. Okay.
Yeah, and Election.
Good ones. All right. Okay.
Well, your turn, Archie. Your turn.
Nice.
You cannot talk movies about schools without just bringing up the great John Hughes in general. I mean, the guy was the master.
Yeah.
So, you know, absolutely. And my number one of his is I'm going to go with 16 Candles,
Nice.
which is, again, a little bit off the beaten path. You got to go with Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I mean, come on,
100%.
forget about it. But my number one, it's not dead set on high school, but it definitely revolves a high school senior, Risky Business.
Woo!
Okay. Little Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
All
To this
right.
day, I still quote, Princeton could use a guy like Joel. Because that's been the story of my life. I can never get into Princeton just on the normal grades, but you do a little of the extracurricular activity and you might be able to do great things.
All right, Archie, I got one more for you. I know you guys got to run. I know you guys are really busy. You talked about the Jets.
Yeah.
You know, his famously, right, your business partner is a huge New England Patriots fan. I don't think everybody knows it, right? So what's it like, really probably for the first time in definitely in your guys' relationship, but for the first time in 2+ decades, for his team to not be better than the Jets? How is he coping with that? And more importantly, how does it feel knowing that you're sort of the cream of the crop, or at least one of the teams at the top of the division there?
See, Wahlberg he's a very smart man. He'll never give me that grace. So first of all, he's like, you got Rodgers, you guys are looking good this year. You're looking good, because he's setting me up for the fall.
Yeah.
It's a Jet fan. All they have to do is, if the Patriots beat the Jets once, he's going to claim victory. And I can't blame him, because the Jets have to sweep the Patriots this season. They just have to, because they're going to, best case scenario, they split the Dolphins and they split the Bills. They got a gauntlet. All the teams in the AFC used to have a gauntlet, but you got to play the Chiefs. You got to play the Eagles. You got to play the Cowboys. You got to play the Giants. God, I'm missing. I mean, there's so many crazy games. Chargers, the Raiders, who knows? But the Broncos are back. It's a gauntlet. So I do not rub it in his face. I never will. And even if they do, I never will rub it in anyone's face. I just want a playoff victory. That's all I'm looking for.
I know.
I'm not greedy.
I'm a Browns fan, man. I know. I get it. We got our one Browns, and that's the thing. So put yourself in my shoes, right? So 2 years ago, right, we demolished the Steelers, our house of horrors in the playoffs. Dream scenario. So my point is, I'm rooting for you, Archie. I'm rooting for you, and I'm rooting for the Jets. All right, listen, that's it.
Well,
guys, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Archie, we appreciate your continued support of our show. You keep coming on. You know, we got to go through an executive assistant and all that now.
we've come up the last couple of years.
It's harder than ever to get to you, so we appreciate you making the time for us. And Fernando, you are definitely a friend of the show, man. Thank you so much for being on. We are going to follow your career. Huge fans of what you do, man. We will continue to support you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, seriously.
Appreciate it.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Zero Dark Nerdy, the Galaxy's favorite pop culture podcast, brought to you by the Believe Podcast Network, betonline.ag, and Sailfish Comics with 2 S's, with 3 locations here in North Carolina, 1 in Concord, 1 in Greensboro, 1 in Winston-Salem for all your geeky needs out there. Big shout out to our website sponsor. That is our good friends over at Zibster. That is Zibster, who can take care of all of your website as well as SEO needs. We've been using them for the last 3.5 years now, and I got to tell you, we have never been happier with just the ease and use of our website. SEO friendly, very easy to take stuff in and out. I mean, we couldn't be happier. So be sure to check out Zibster for all your website needs. On behalf of everybody at Zero Dark Nerdy, this is your boy Brian, aka El Nino. We'll see you next time. Peace.
Victory! And anger management? Fuck anger management.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.
Hey, Hey, it's Michelle Beadle. That's right, the Michelle Beadle. You're welcome. You love talking about sports. I love talking about sports. You know the only thing cooler than talking about sports? Sports! And right now, all your favorite sports are on Sirius XM. I'm talking every NFL game, every game from the NBA, NHL, MLB, every NASCAR race, golf major conference college sports, and all the top games in the WNBA. If it gets your heart pumping, it's on Sirius XM. So start your free trial of Sirius XM today. Visit SiriusXM.com/believe.